We're so glad you're here.
We believe in bringing in experts to inspire and to educate women so that they can live empowered, fulfilled, and successful lives.
When women support women, we change the world. Here we go.
You're going to love this program.
Hi, Barbara. Hi, Nancy.
How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I am so happy to be here with you today. So who are we talking to?
Yes. Well, our guest today, Nancy, is an entrepreneur, feminist, advocate, and an expert in creating change and breaking gender stereotypes. We need more of her.
Right.
And what's so exciting to me about her is that while so many of her foundational accomplishments really occurred before we met, over these past 6 years, to see her rise and elevate her voice, expand her presence and influence on major media outlets, in the White House on advisory committees, on the TED stage, and in front of other countless audience members, one listener at a time, is so exciting to me. Our guest is Jodi Bondi Norgaard. Welcome, Jodi, to The Recharge.
Well, Barbara, Nancy, thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah, we're so thrilled. Looking forward to this conversation. So a little more about Jodi. She's the founder of Dream Big Toy Company and the creator of the award-winning Go-Go Sports girls line of dolls, books, and apps for girls, encouraging healthy and active play over fashion and body image. Jodi's also a keynote speaker, as I mentioned, diversity and inclusion consultant, and an activist pushing media, retail to do a better job portraying girls beyond these long-standing stereotypes.
Mm-hmm.
Such important work.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's hard.
It is. So thank you for fighting the fight. Our theme this year for our Women's Forum and for the Recharge podcast is designing and living your brilliant life. Your journey has been a tough one, and you have just hung in there. So why don't you share a little bit about your path to designing and living this brilliant life? And brilliant is so true for you because you're really shining a light on some really important issues.
Mm-hmm. Well, I never intended to get into, this line of work. However, gender stereotypes and gender issues were always on my radar from a very young age. But I never knew what I could do to change it personally, so I just pushed it aside until I came upon a line of dolls that just stopped me in my tracks. They had on, short skirts, crop top, belly button ring, big hair, lots of makeup. I pick up, one of the dolls, and my sweet 9-year-old daughter was with me at the time. And I look at the hang tag, and the name on the hang tag was Lovely Lola. And at that moment, I knew there wasn't one parent out there that wanted their daughter to look, act, or be called Lovely Lola. So I just, that was it. I bought the doll. My daughter's like, Mom, is that the birthday gift for Maddie? I'm like, no. I'm buying it to show Dad, which confused her even more. But anyway, I took the doll and I showed my husband. I said, I'm so sick and tired of all these images that are negative, that are marketed to girls. My boys at the time were 11 and 5, and I started to see products marketed to them associated with violence and aggression. And then, with my daughter, it was all about, appearance. And I just thought my boys aren't violent or aggressive, and I didn't want to encourage that. And my daughter's super smart, and I didn't want her to think that all of a sudden at the age of 9, she had to start, focusing on her appearance. And so that's when I launched the Go-Go Sports Girls. It took 2 years from rough draft to the actual debut of the first doll, which was tennis girl Gracie at the U.S. Open in New York, and where 500 sold out in 6 days. And I thought I had the next best thing. And I was super excited as a small business owner. And then I took it to Toy Fair, and that was in February of 2009. I took it to Toy Fair, and no, it wasn't the next best thing. I had so many buyers come to my booth saying, oh, I love your product. My daughter would love Soccer Girl. It is just something that she would just, hold on to and carry everywhere. And I'm like, oh, that's great. How many would you like to buy? And they'd all give me the hand. No. It'll never sell. And I'd say, well, why? You said you loved it. They'd say, well, girls, ultimately, they like fashion. Can you create fashion?
Oh, God.
I'm like, that's my point. I'm
Right.
like, as a woman, as a mother of a daughter, I am so positive. Girls like more than fashion. So I hung in there for 5 long years. And anyway, it's just the journey goes on and on and on. And, every time you're, as as entrepreneurs, you always feel like you're climbing this mountain. And there's just so many false peaks.
Yeah.
And I continue to, get to false peaks. And yeah. So
was it your conviction? I mean, what was it that every new wall, every barrier continually, how did you hang in? How have you hung in there?
It was really interesting. I always saw, these barriers as like a puzzle, like, oh, I can get around this. Oh, I can figure this one out. Oh, I can do that. I mean, there were many that were, setbacks. And in fact, there was one big one where my husband and I we were in Arizona on a vacation, and he was going to play golf, and he's like, I was so sad, like I couldn't just make this work. I couldn't figure it out. I was just at a low point, and I said, I'm just having a tough time. And he said, well, maybe it's just our culture isn't ready for it. And I was like, I'm like, but maybe he's right. I'm like, but how can we not be ready for this? Mm-hmm. So I'm laying in bed. Honestly, I have the pillow over my head. I'm just laying there trying to figure it out. And my phone rings. And I'm like, what? Like, my phone is ringing. And I look at it and it said NBC. I'm like, NBC? Like, why is NBC calling me? And so I answer the phone and I said, hello. And they're like, this woman, her name was Stephanie. She's like, hi, Jodi, my name is Stephanie, blah, blah, blah. I'm one of the producers at the Today Show. We'd like to do a feature on you. I'm like, I'm alive. So things like that kept me going, right? There were like these moments that I was like, well, I'm going to quit now. The Today Show doesn't do features on just anybody, And so my husband came back in. I'm like, oh, I'm so moving forward and I'm going to New York. So anyway, so things like that, would just keep me moving forward and I continue to ask questions, but go ahead, Nancy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it speaks to your tenacity and grit, and obviously your passion about, changing this culture that, is so pervasive, one doll at a time, and just changing those stereotypes. I mean, and that takes courage, Jodi. And I'm curious about, what inspires you to push past those boundaries. Obviously, and we know that you're onto something, but what gives you the courage to push past and to really serve and be more of, who you can be?
Well, because I know I'm right. I just do. I'm not that type of person that says, oh, I'm right about everything, right? Because I know I have a lot to learn, and I don't like to argue, and I like nice conversations. I like to learn. But when it comes to this, like letting women rise to their full potential, I'm 100% right.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps me moving forward. I also, I'm a pretty good observer. Even when I was younger, I was a pretty good observer, and it always confused me. Like, why do we have, like, especially when I was a younger, working in Chicago, with a big corporation, there were all these self-help classes for women. How to fit in. This is before having children. It was like how to fit in, how to do it all, how to be the super mom. And I was like taking all this in. And I was like, why are there all these self-help classes for women? Because in my opinion, women aren't broken. We don't need to be fixed. It's our culture that's broken. It's our culture that needs to be fixed, not us. We're not broken. We're fine. So
Yeah.
so I feel like all these self-help classes, these self-help books, all these things that point out what the problem is when we get to adulthood. My focus is, where does the problem start? Where's the root of the problem? Well, it starts in childhood. And we need to start looking at that. And now we need to start holding the toy companies accountable and to a very higher standard. We need to hold media companies, advertising companies, retail companies to a higher standard, because it does affect our kids. If there was something that our kids were ingesting that was poison or that harmed them, that thing would be pulled off the shelf. So why aren't we doing the same with items that could help hurt their self-confidence, that could emotionally, stunt them and, keep them from rising to their full potential? I don't understand why we're not looking at that more, but I am. I'm going to make sure I'm heard.
Right. Well, and it's not just the girls, right? I mean, who think, oh, I need to have that cinched waist and look beautiful all the time. But then the boys who see those dolls, so this is objectification, right? Of the girls. It's
right.
And it just is how, boys feel that, how they can treat women, right? Right. The objectification, for sure.
And to your point, I know that when we were preparing for this, you had said that it starts at an age, 4 or 5, that those stereotypes are kind of embedded because of, all of these, everything we're talking about, and because of a doll, or because there isn't a girl soccer doll. And you're right. It's not that women and girls are broken. It is the culture that has to change from that point, from those young ages, because it has to change.
Right. By the age of 5, little girls start to think that their gender can't do as much as the male gender, and which is heartbreaking. So, they really pick up. Their little minds are just like, like the old saying goes, like sponges. So we have to really take a deeper look at what we're doing to our children.
Yeah, right. So you said, your challenges have been, just, I guess, the industry not being willing to change, or what they perceive as taking a risk, right? And wanting to maintain the status quo. I guess, are there other challenges that have surprised you, or I guess, or what or progress you've made as you've pushed through some of those challenges?
Well, I just read a quote by Adam Grant, the psychological organizational psychologist. But it was, I can't remember it exactly, but it's just like, it may not seem like you're making progress, right, when you're fighting for something and working towards something. But looking back, you will see that there has been progress, and there's been lots of, turns in the road. And I agree with that. But I also want to add that my road has been a Dr. Seuss road. It has just been all over the path. I mean, it has been up and down and up and down and backwards and forwards. So it has been an interesting journey. So Barbara, ask your question again. What was?
I wanted to know, you talked about the naysayers and industry not wanting to take that risk. So I wanted to get a sense, are there other challenges that kind of surprised you on the way? And then have there also been that progress, you're like, some proud moments of, thank God I've been able to push through this?
Well, it was interesting. I have had many comments in the toy industry. It is interesting that the middle management of the toy industry is a lot of women, a lot of smart, good women, but at the top, I've had so many men tell me, no, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And so the women are like, gosh, we got to get you going. We got to get you going. But it's the men who are just like, no, it's just not. We don't want to take that chance. So in the toy industry, I have had comments, because when I came out with the dolls, I came out with black dolls, brown dolls, white dolls, and so many people would tell me, black dolls don't sell. I'm like, well, that's insane. They need to start selling. You need to put them on your shelf. Have you ever had any on your shelf? They're like, ooh, really? Blonde hair, blue-eyed dolls sell. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, no. I'm like, this is what we're used to, but let's diversify it. I am betting that it's gonna work. So when I created my dolls too, I made sure they were in correct proportion to little girls' bodies by measuring my daughter and all her little friends to make sure that it was. And I shrunk it down. And so many people saying, gosh, your doll's legs, they're short. They need to be longer. I'm like, please quit telling me what to do. I have figured this out. And I'm like, no, that's because this is in correct proportion to a little girl's body.
Right.
So, I would get this pushback, these comments. I would also get comments, when I entered the publishing industry. I mean, not too long ago, a big publisher told me, honestly, we're going to pass on your book because boys don't read about girls. I'm like, it's not all about the boys. Again, it's not all about the boys. But if you give them a female character, I can guarantee they're going to read. If she's interesting, if she's, if it's a cool character, they're going to read about her. I mean, my boys read, of course I'm giving it to them too, but it's like, why? They should know about what women do. They should know about what men do. I mean, it should be equal. It shouldn't just be, all about men or all about male authors. We need to hear all voices from all sides.
Yeah, I think it was exciting when the women's soccer team won and the impact that had. Boys wearing their jerseys. I mean, that was really cool. Right?
It is very cool. But again, we have to fight hard for everything.
Yeah.
Like they had to fight so hard just to be equal.
Yeah. And I think not only did they win, but they also, women's soccer just won equal pay status as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's
if that's what you're exactly.
I was talking actually. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So Jodi, given your influence and your impact, it really serves to support so many others. So I'm curious about how you help others, especially women, to really have the courage to step into their power and to have greater fulfillment in their lives, given all of these challenges that we faced.
Well, I do believe that we all need to speak up. We need our voices heard. And even more today on a very historic day in our world, not to my pleasure, that we need to hear our voices. We need to stand up and we need to support each other, and we need to I told both of you this before, but I just read so many books on women and how to encourage other women. And one way, an easy way to do it is to, on social media, follow women, like their posts, repost their posts if it's something you like, make sure that they are heard by others. So we can use this to our advantage. But we need to, I know we've heard this over and over, support one another, but it's not a cliche. It has to happen. I try to give women courage because I can't say that I've always been courageous in my life. It scares me. I've been fearful. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the moment you step over that fear, that next fear is easier, and that next fear is easier to step over. So, the courage is a really strong, and it's hard. It is hard because you do put a lot out there. Like I said before, I could just give up and be that possum in the middle of the road and say I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. But I just can't.
Yeah, I don't think any of us can afford to at this point. There's so much change that really has to happen. And one of the things that, you mentioned a moment ago, just even sharing and reposting social media posts, but also just, cheering other women on, talking about other women, sharing their names and their accomplishments when they're not in the room, and finding opportunities to connect and empower women together is powerful also. And, we spoke to another guest who said, one woman at a time, but when we come together collectively and harness our courage and use our voices, that's when we can make an impact and we can truly affect change.
Mm-hmm. Well, like what you're doing here with your
Right.
podcast. I mean, it's great. You're giving me a voice. You're giving women a voice. It's awesome. So thank you for doing that. And we need, and I know it's not easy on your end. It's time consuming, and but it's really good to hear other women and their accomplishments. And together, she's right. There is a quote. It's like one woman can make a difference, but together we can rock the world.
Right, right. Well, and one of the things that we've noticed when we do our financial programming, we sometimes have men in the room too. And I think having men, it's essential, right, for men to help create greater awareness, because there's just sometimes it's an awareness issue and there's no ill intent. It's just how we're all socialized. So tell us a little bit about the DEI consulting work that you do and some of that experience.
Yeah. So, when the pandemic hit, and after George Floyd, the killing, the diversity, equity, and inclusion field exploded, right? I mean, people were wanting, corporations were wanting, training. So a company in Chicago, the Kaleidoscope Group, and we had, I knew some people there, and they're like, help. Can you help us? I'm like, yes, I can help you. I can help you. So I've been doing a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting, training, facilitating. It has just added to, oh my gosh, the knowledge I have learned. People are good. People, like to your point, Barbara, people want to learn. They want to be educated. They want to understand. Great questions. I work with large corporations. I'm working with the Federal Reserve Bank right now. They're just smart people that want to know more, but a lot of times people don't know where to go, right? They don't know what questions to ask either. Am I going to offend somebody if I ask this question? So I get it. So we're all learning, but so I've been doing a lot of consulting. During the pandemic, I wrote a book. So that's in the hands of a literary agent right now, hopefully. A publisher will pick it up, but it's just called More Than a Doll. It just points out, basically what we're talking about here today, putting focus on, the children, where it begins, and it's intermixed with my journey of challenging the status quo and what I went through and continue to go through.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm curious, just to kind of piggyback on Barbara's question about your DE&I consulting, Jodi. I totally agree with you. After some of what happened in the last 2 years, that space blew up, and we've heard so many companies, large, mid-size, all types of companies are really focused on not only DE&I, but the aspect of belonging as well. And so they're all trying to put together a strategy. But one of the things I've heard is that they're struggling to execute on that strategy because they all talk the talk, or not all, but they talk the talk, but they can't execute on it. Is that something you're finding?
Yeah, 100%. 100%. We are finding in the last 2 years, we did, like you said, Nancy, we talk a good talk, but when it comes to implementation, that is harder.
Right.
So, people can say, I kind of viewed this like when I was growing up, like my dad, I have one sister, my dad wanted what's best for me and my sister always. But when it came to gender, women in general, collectively, not so much, right? Not so much. So now we're seeing this, right? People are like, yeah, I want more diversity. I want more women. I agree with that. Nobody should be, racist or, misogynistic. But when it comes to play, that's harder. So what we're finding is that we really need to reach the top of these corporations, because it does have that trickle down effect. So we're meeting with more and more C-suite executives. We've hit a lot of middle management, upper management, but now we need the top tier, and hopefully that will implement more changes. We're hearing this. I'm not kidding. Every day. we're hearing this. Like people
Yeah.
are tired of just going through training and talking.
Right, checking the box on
I
the
was just
training.
going to say
Yeah,
that, Barbara.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
But now we want to see it in action.
right.
So there's going to be some pressure for companies to do this.
Right.
Right. Well, actually, with the whole some of the SEC requirements and some of the public exchanges, at least for public companies, the whole ESG requirements now for equity, for environmental awareness, and infusing that within your organization, social, which really is the DEI element, and governance, right? And we're even seeing some of that on the investment side, on
Yeah.
the DEI infusion on ESG. So,
Oh, good.
yeah. So this is going to be a hard question to answer because you probably have a lot of different ideas on a superpower. But if Jodi's in charge, you've got supreme power, what's the first change you'd make?
Equality. I'd make it 50-50. We'd have greater balance in our world if we saw the eyes equally through men and women. But right now we don't. And we're going backwards. And I don't want to go backwards. And I'm going to fight not to go backwards. But if it would be 100% to make it equal. It's not equal right now. I don't care what anybody says. I have read things that, there have been some guys like, women have more power than they've ever had. It's like, no, when I feel safe and my daughter feels safe and you feel, in a parking garage at night, not the threat.
Yeah.
Then it'll be more equal. There was not too long ago, there was a serial rapist in London, and they ordered all the women to stay inside. And women came out and said, no, you don't tell us to stay inside. You tell all the men to stay inside, because one of you is raping all these women. So you all have to stay inside and the women can come out. We shouldn't be punished for one of you raping us. So I thought that was really interesting. We always have to think of that like that. Flip it, right? Let's flip it. Like, we're so used to things like, oh yeah, there's a rapist out there. I have to be careful. I have to stay inside. I have to protect myself. Yes. Okay, now let's flip it, right? No, we need to say, hey, one of you cuckoo men out there, you're raping people. Now you have to stay inside, not us. So anyway, it's just a little bit of a, trying to change our thinking, because it's like so deeply rooted in all of our what we've been taught and what we believe.
I know our kids went to the same university, and I really loved at the orientation when they were talking about safe interactions between men and women on campus. And it was just say yes, not just say no. Like, it was like it should.
Wearing that T-shirt one day, and when he came home, I'm like, whoa, wait,
oh my
what?
gosh.
Tell me about that.
And I'm like, duh, of course. It shouldn't have to be a requirement to say no. It should have to be an affirmation of yes, right? I mean, I don't know why we didn't think of that before, but it was so simple, right? But you said, let's turn it around the other way. And it made so much more sense turning it around.
Yeah. So these are some really heavy topics that we're talking about. And I think today, our hearts are heavy. For many women perhaps, and I'm curious, Jodi, how do you put this down? Not that you ever do, but how do you put this down and come to a place where you can practice some enjoyment and some self-care? And how do you do that?
Well, I have always believed in some sort. What is your meditation, right? My meditation is exercise. So, moving my body, clearing my head. If I had to sit all day and I mean, like you said, our hearts and minds could be very heavy for a lot of people today. Well, and we could, crawl into bed and put the covers over our heads, or we can get out and move and keep a clear head. Be with nature. I feel very strongly, somehow being with nature, whether it's walking, in a forest preserve, kayaking on a river, golfing, tennis, whatever it is. Keeping active and making that connection with nature is very calming to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Don't get me wrong. I get fired up a lot. I think my husband sometimes is like, "Oh, can you go for another bike ride?" you're still a little prickly there. So yeah.
Yeah, nature definitely does something to ground you, for sure.
There's that.
Yeah. The shoulders just drop, right? And yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So one of the things we like to also talk about on our podcast is, especially with women who live such intentional lives, how have you used your intentionality to build your financial resources and to be resilient financially? What's been helpful? What's been challenging for you?
Well, my business was very challenging because I didn't make much money at all until I sold it. But that was difficult because it was self-funded, and I continued to put all the money back into for production, which is very costly and hard. But my husband and I have always been equally aware of our finances, equally involved with our financial planners. I do know some women that have no idea what their financial state is, which just is incredible to me. They let one person do all of that's his job, and that's not how it is with us. I mean, it's like, no. I want to know where the money is. I want to know where it goes. This is my life too. I contribute. Where's it going? Right. I want to understand. And I ask a lot of questions because, you two are very, very, obviously very knowledgeable in your industry. But, a lot of times I feel like, I think my questions are stupid or dumb, but I've gotten over that, right? Like I need to ask every question, even if it's the most basic question, or I don't understand, because that only makes me better with that next question and that next question, more educated. And I try to educate myself. It's not my field. It's not my background. So it does take me a little bit more question asking, but I've gotten over my fear of, dumb questions. They're all good questions.
They are. Thank you for that. Yes. So Jodi, what is next for you? You said you wrote a book, which sounds great. It's with a literary agent, which is a big accomplishment in and of itself.
It is. 1 out of every 6,000 authors gets picked up by a literary agent. So I'm happy with that. So that's step one. Step two is the next is a publisher. So that's a big one too. So, hopefully a publisher picks it up. My agent is confident somebody will. What I have working is some pretty cool stuff. Like I said, I can't give up. I seem to always find a way. So when Biden announced his Gender Policy Council, and the head of his Gender Policy Council, Jen Klein, I reached out to Jen because I did some work with the Obama administration, just some White House conferences. So I didn't actually do any collaboration with them, but I was invited to some White House conferences that were pretty cool. So I reached out to Jen Klein with another woman I work with whose name is Laurel Wider, and she's like my partner in making things, getting things out there as it relates to toys and media and children. And so we approached Jen Klein and said, we'd like to collaborate with you as it relates to toys and media. She said, I got an email back within an hour. I was like, ooh, that's exciting. And she said, yes. She's like, I'd like you to work with us. So we've been working with the White House, collaborating with them. We just recently, through the Toy Association, conducted a study with the Gina Davis Institute that will be announced in the next couple weeks, which is really
that's exciting.
Incredible. And we're hoping to, we'll bring this back to the White House and see what they have
Right.
to say. But I'm hoping that I have an opportunity to work with them on something bigger as it pertains to this study, which is honestly, it is incredible. A lot to move forward on with the study.
Great.
Hopefully we'll
Great.
have a lot of changes because
Yeah.
of this study.
Yes, right.
I know. I'm really excited. It's the first one ever. There's never been a study with toys as diversity, equity, and inclusion relates to toys. Because even the Gina Davis Institute said, is there anything we can go off of? It's like, no, this is the first ever. There's nothing.
Right.
That's
So
fantastic.
they did an amazing job.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, if I hadn't adopted a non-Caucasian daughter myself, I never would have been as aware as I became around not just gender stereotype, but, diversity issues from a race perspective, and not being able to find a birthday card that had an angel on it that wasn't blonde. It was, it was
Right,
impossible.
right.
It was impossible, actually.
Right.
And helped me when I got a sense of her, ideal view of herself, and some challenges we had because of all that stereotype, and the impact it can have, especially through junior high and the teen years, on image. And we so appreciate you focusing on root cause issues, because that is really our commitment to support women and to help women live more empowered and fulfilled lives. A lot of these narratives we're carrying from early on, and the toy, starting with toys is such an important place to start. So thank you so much for your courage and grit to hang in there.
I know, and it's thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Keep going, Jodi.
Well, I can't. I know I can't stop there. I have had plenty of opportunities to stop, plenty, and I've gotten this far, and I got to keep going. It's just I just know I know women have so much to offer. They have so much to give, and their views are very important, and we need to have their voice at every table, whether it's a business table, whether it's a personal table, a volunteer table. I don't care what table it is, they need to be there.
Hey, here.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And we look forward to hearing more about what you bring to the surface relative to the study, and more people learning about this and raising awareness. And I know that trajectory of yours is just going to keep on rising. So thank you.
Well, thank you for letting me speak my voice and for others to hear it. So I hope I can give others courage to step over their fear and find their passion.
You sure have.
Yes, you have. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jodi.
Thank you.